Welcome to the Consciousness Anywhere and Everywhere podcast. I am Shannonohara, and I invite you to a completely new world of possibilities. Welcome to Communicating with Entities. Talk to the Entity Specialty Spotlight Focus for the month of July. How does it get better than this? If you're interested in everything and anything entity, ease, consciousness related, you're going to definitely want to check out the previous episodes in the Consciousness Anywhere podcast on the Talk to the Entities specialty classes. I've been focusing and spotlighting each of them throughout the year. So this brings us to mid-year, and one of the more practical and misunderstood specialty focuses of Talk to the Entities, which is talking to entities. And I love this. I love talking to entities and communication in general as a lens to really get us to question our preconceived, presumptive notions about what communication is. And then there's the whole quandary of like, why would I want to talk to entities? Which, believe me, I completely understand. However, it would sort of be like thinking, why would I ever want to talk to anybody? Like going through your life, recognizing that communicating and talking to people is actually one of the massive ways in which things work and how you get things to work and how relationships work and how practical societies function. And it's a shame that we've lost, i.e., we haven't just lost, it's been completely decimated. The reality that we do have to talk to entities. And I say have to because a lot of people have a huge amount of resistance and reluctance to even acknowledging that entities exist. So this conversation is going to be for those of you guys that are over that hurdle, over that thing of that entities don't exist, and into the, okay, I'm aware of entities do exist, now how do I deal with it? And this is what that will be a conversation towards. So in Talk to the Entities, there are four main avenues, tools, philosophies, pillars, principles, call them whatever you want, that all Talk to the Entities tools lead back to and support. And they are clearing, communicating, receiving, and cooperating. And I posit that those are the only four things that are ever required with entities: clearing, communicating, receiving, and cooperating. Last month, we released an episode on the specialty of Talk to the Entities house clearing from A to Z, which is a dipping your toe into the entity clearing arena and reality and tools. And the next step on the track is communication. For there are some entities that you can't clear because they need to talk to you, or they need to talk to somebody, or you need to talk to them. So one of the major obstacles that most people, including myself, have and had when embarking on the restoration mission of learning how to talk to entities again, because I also posit that children know how to already talk to, cooperate, and participate with entities and all energies, but that's taught out of us very early on. And there is such a huge negativity campaign against entities and against those who talk to entities, see entities, deal with entities, that those of us who live in this world who do see entities, talk to entities, and are aware of entities, oftentimes have to overcome a lot of negative projections by society. So talking to entities is, number one, it's a restoration of the energy flows that have been disrupted or completely decimated around talking to entities. Because in truth, communication is really easy, and it's the resistance to receiving that has to be dealt with first and foremost. So I like to indicate the difference between talking and communication. Do trees communicate? Well, yes, they do. In fact, there is even scientific backing that trees communicate, and it's a really, I would say, interesting area of study that they're actually able to study. I sort of dream of a day when communication with and cooperation with consciousness can be backed up in a way that makes it easier for people to have that reality. So when you look at communication, do trees communicate? Yes. Okay. So are they talking? No, because they're not using words, they're not using mouths, they're not using brains. The communication is occurring through energy. And that's the way I teach talking to entities, through energy. You have far more awareness and subtle knowing than you probably recognize. Number one, probably because you've never practiced it and or practiced it very seldom. And or number two, you've actually literally been resisting it. And number three, you were told not to develop that or have that, or you might have indicated as a child, that you were talking to some entity or aware of some entity, and it could have even been like an imaginary friend or, imaginary, but it could have been a spirit friend that you told somebody about, and that person essentially gaslit you into believing that your perception or communication of entities and with entities was wrong or incorrect. Like you were wrong, you were crazy, you were making it up. And that has to be addressed first to be able to have what's possible. So in the Talk to the Entities specialty, communicating with entities, there's a lot of clearings to destroy and uncreate where your capacities for communication, not only with entities, but even just like psychic awareness at all, were disrupted or invalidated. So once you're no longer suppressed or in reaction to or functioning from the invalidation of what was done to you or told to you, or that you bought and made real and true about somebody else's point of view, then you can start actually claiming and owning what you know. And the thing about talking to entities is they don't talk like people. So that's why we have to bring in the tree analogy, because it's far less defined than the way we communicate or the way you're listening to me speak right now in a linear sentence with words that you know. Can entities communicate in this way? Yes. Is it particularly easy for them? Not exactly, because there's communication. I think there's something that's like communication is something like 5% verbal, 95% other things. And we pick up on a lot of information, whether we realize it or not, when words aren't even spoken. So if we take that into the arena of entities, it's like, what is it that you're aware of? What are you picking up on that you've just never acknowledged or claimed? And once you start to acknowledge, like, okay, is this an entity? Okay, how do I communicate with entities? What is the unique way in which I perceive communication from entities? And spoiler alert, a lot of the times it's going to be through your psychic awareness or just your knowing. You can call it whatever you want. And there just, unfortunately, is so little to no education about psychic awareness. Actually, it's an against awareness and education, against being aware. So I could only laugh about it, because those who seek awareness, it's really like, it's so rewarding and it's so freeing, especially when you realize you are talking to entities or that entities are talking to you and like, you're not crazy. Like, it's life-saving a lot of the times. But it is such an adverse path because society is literally against it. That being said, I guess I can't perceive society being against it because I would far rather have this information and this awareness than be I would say living a lie. And at some point, what would it take for it to be within my lifetime? It's like society is going to have to lighten up around spirit stuff because spirits exist. We live in a world of infinite possibility with infinite diversity of beings that don't have our body type, but that do exist. And there are people who perceive it. And there's actually, the reason why I believe Talk to Entities is so successful and possible and profitable is because actually the majority of people are aware of entities. They just have had literally nowhere to go to have that be an easy, peaceful reality, learn the tools, and include all spirits, including themselves. And if we included all beings and judged none, how much more fun could that be? So communicating with entities, talking to entities becomes an essential skill set because you can't clear a lot of entities just need to be cleared. I don't really know why. I just know that it is so. The majority actually just need to be cleared. And then there's going to be some that you can't clear. And that's where the communication comes into play. And the communication can literally be like 30 seconds of transferring of information, or even faster than that. Or it can be an ongoing developing relationship with an entity. And what is required of us in bodies is that we learn to claim and own what are our unique sensations or perceptions of communicating with entities is. So for me, initially, like when I was just first starting to get this for myself in my early 20s, after I had shut it out pretty hardcore in my teens, I came to a yes time where I said yes to entities and yes to my awareness of entities. And I had no idea what it was going to be like, but I had to learn. Because if I didn't, that was not an option. I was either going to die or I was going to learn how to cooperate with the spirit world. Little did I know that cooperating with the spirit world could be such a peaceful, benevolent, profitable, expansive, conscious facilitating gift. And now an advertisement sponsored by Consciousness. Have you heard of the Access.me app? The Access.me app is 25 plus years of Access consciousness classes. Now, if that excites you or overwhelms you, let me tell you that some of the most life-changing, epically, no words to describe the profound transformation of my life and the accessing of infinite possibility I have gained through the classes that you'll find in the Access Me app. If you were to purchase each one of these classes individually, you would be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. If you were to attend each of these Access Consciousness classes, you would need to have been going to classes for 25 plus years, like me. But now, Access.me costs only $275 a month. So you're essentially renting these incredibly profound, priceless, literally invaluable classes that will access consciousness, transform your universe, and essentially educate you in areas that too often we really don't receive a good education. Like, how do we have easy, honoring, intimate, profound relationships with ourselves, with others? What would it take for magic to actually be what we turned to for having more money, for having more health? What would it take to not feel like all of your wishes and dreams for consciousness and lightness and being happy to not just be a stupid pipe dream that are never going to happen because what's honored here is density and intensity? Sure,
And what do you know? Access.me is a treasure trove of possibility that you can subscribe to on a monthly basis to access more consciousness. How does it get any easier than that? Check it out, access.me online, and see you in the fields of consciousness.
So initially, when I was figuring out how to talk to entities, I learned that one of the ways in which I was receiving the communication of an entity was because I was thinking their thoughts and feeling their feelings. So if that entity was depressed or had committed suicide or was confused or lost or hungry or all sorts of things, I would think their thoughts. I wouldn't hear it like you hear the voice of somebody else and you know it's somebody else talking. I would feel it and think it. But I could tell the difference between what was my thoughts and what were not my thoughts. And I started recognizing that's one of the ways in which I received communication from entities, was by experiencing what they were experiencing. And over time, I got really good at being aware of that function. Then there was this other thing that I realized was that entities don't talk in this linear, they don't experience time like we do. They're subject to like a different reality, not the reality, the earth time that we experience or that we think we experience. So they don't talk in sentences that string out through time. They can give information all in one flash, which seems like one flash to us, but to them, it's just the communication. So it's more like spherical or quick. And so I had to learn how to speed up to catch the information. And since communication is a two-way street, I would also ask them to slow down because it was too fast for me. And I recognized that when I would ask them to help me understand, they would, to the best of their ability. Which brings me to a third component of communicating with entities, which is not all entities communicate in the same way, just like not all people communicate in the same way. Have you known people that are excellent communicators and clear and easy to talk to, versus have you also known people who are horrible at communicating and not clear and not easy to talk to, and you always sort of feel like confused afterwards? This is exactly what is so for entities as well. Some entities are really good communicators and some are really not good communicators. So you have to also, one of the things that I teach in Talk to the Entities is that you have to be able to determine if the confusion you're experiencing in talking to entities is actually not your confusion. It might be the entity's inability to communicate well. So those are, I think, the three great areas to get people started in learning if this is something you do want to learn. It's really more like four. It's the first one is really acknowledging that you are aware and how does communication with entities present itself to you? Because it's not going to be this really not necessarily clear and obvious and normal and linear and this reality thing. It's definitely going to be something that you experience that's potentially you could call it not normal, but what would it take for it to be the new normal? And it really, those of you who are choosing this have to recognize that you're choosing something that is different, and that normal, I mean, who the heck even defines what normal is? Because normal to me is definitely different than what's normal to you and normal to others. And it's like, you've got to look at, well, what do you know? And what would you like to choose? And if you know you're aware of entities and you want to learn how to expand the capacity to communicate, you have to start to acknowledge the unique way in which entity communication presents itself for you. Then, recognizing where the entities are functioning from. Are they a good communicator or a bad communicator? Are they going too fast, for example? In the Talk to the Entities beginning class, and I think it's actually in the communicating specialty as well, is the communication flowchart, which I want to thank Brett Roche, who is an access consciousness facilitator and somebody who's I've known for many, many years. And like 15 years ago, somewhere around 15, might have even been 16 or more years ago, he came to me and he had been doing Talk to Entities, and he had the idea to make a flowchart for communication, because I had been trying to explain it to people just verbally, and he's like, well, why don't we try making a flowchart? And he came to me with the first prototype of the communication flowchart, and I modified it a bit, but not like he came with a lot of the structure of it built, and I added to it, and that is what appears in the beginning manual and in the communication specialty. It's the getting clear on who's talking to you flowchart, because people tend to overcomplicate communicating with entities. I mean, people overcomplicate relationships with people, period. And then when you add entities on top of it, people can get very lost. So the flowchart starts with the question of, is this an entity? And if it isn't, then you leave the Talk to the Entities manual. But if it is an entity, then you follow the flowchart. And one of the things that a lot of us need to recognize is that people and entities are only really talking to us for one of two reasons. One, it's because they want something from us, or because they want to give something to us. So that's where we start the questioning of, does this entity want to give something to me, or does it want something from me? And then that breaks down into a lot of subsections. But if I'm honest with you, it fits all on one page. So it's not even really that complicated. We tend to, this isn't an entity related complication. People overcomplicate psychologically relationships and communications. And we tend to extrapolate into all these stories, but sorry, that's a sort of a side note. The thing is, the flowchart is pretty effective, and if you follow it, it works. I know this because I have literally had feedback from thousands of people who have used it, and they profess that it has created so much more ease and really taught them, given them sort of like training wheels and like a framework to practice communicating with entities without getting lost. Because initially you might get lost because it's such an underdeveloped pathway for us, especially as adults who have been not developing our entity interaction capacities. Ha, 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 ha. Who's talking to you? And one of the things that I know occurs for a lot of people, and it definitely occurred for me in the beginning, is when you come upon this concept of talking to entities, a lot of people have this initial reaction of overwhelm. Oh my gosh, if I talk to entities, I'm going to be overwhelmed because there's so many entities and it's so much and it's so much. And yes, it is. It's sort of like if you're like, oh my God, I'm going to have to talk to like every person on earth. Yeah, but you're not going to talk to every person on earth, right? You're going to talk to the people who are in your immediate vicinity for the reason of cooperating to get something or to give something. And this is what we do on this planet. We cooperate. And the principles or the pillars of Talk to the Entities, clearing, communicating, receiving, and cooperating, they're often spherical. They interact with one another. You don't just have one, you can have a combination of them. And communication is a willingness to cooperate, which is a capacity that is so lacking in people. It's like, what would it be like if we lived in a world where people listened to one another rather than reacted, rather than suppressed, rather than judged? If all information was just an interesting point of view, could you receive it all, disregard the detritus, and receive the gift or what's of value? And if we shut out entities, we lose and we miss so much value. Yes, when we shut out entities, we also do then shut out the annoying ones, because there are annoying entities. And are all entities worth talking to? It's just the same rule of thumb as with people. Like, are all people worth talking to? Are all people easy to talk to? Are all people rewarding to talk to? Absolutely not. That's the same with entities. So if we remove this lens of superstition and start treating it as the practical life skill that it is, and really the people who, I'm really speaking to the entity sensitive people out there, and you know who you are. And some of you, this relationship, this conversation about like entities is sort of like interesting, but maybe not life essential. And then there's some people who being able to work consciously with entities and effectively, it will save their lives. I am one of them, and I have worked with others who this is so. For entity awareness that's gone unrecognized, unacknowledged, suppressed, or even worse, like distorted and manipulated through psychological gaslighting and drugs, it turns into a very dark and a very heavy and a very scary place. And it just doesn't need to be that way. Let the light in. Let the infection of unconsciousness dissipate. And let in a new world of possibility where all beings are included and everything that you know is included. And those of us that do communicate with entities are no longer wrong. We're actually strong. And I hope that for you, wherever you are listening to this, that what you know, even if it falls outside of the box of reality or the box of normality, that you have it. Like, because like reality is a choice. You do not need to be the same as the person standing next to you. Like literally, there is nothing and no one who dictates and determines what you can choose but you, ultimately. You can believe, you can think, you can feel, you can have like literally anything that you choose. Are you the chooser of your psychological landscape? Or do you allow others to dictate what you are willing to believe and know and choose and have as a reality? And that's a really big indication I'm making, and one that I'm not being cavalier about. This is why we have tools, the tools of access consciousness, the tools of talk to the entities, because we do live in a really weird psychological landscape where people will make other people wrong, invalidate other people. People are psychologically abusive. Their judgment is used like way too much in abundance. And that can be a lot to deal with. But you can deal with it, or you can live at the effect of it. So if you're looking for something different, please dive into the tools of Talk to the Entities and Access Consciousness. We have so much free and paid content, classes, books, you name it. If you want it, we got it. There will be links below for anyone who wants to follow or walk or step or choose into having more, receiving more consciousness. And I hope you find what you're looking for. And what would it take for entities to be a welcome and honored part of society, no longer excluded? And what magic, miracle, mystery, and possibility can we all be if we had more inclusion? Bye, guys. Thank you for listening to this show. My target is to make consciousness easy to find and choose. So if you enjoyed this podcast, please leave a 5-star review on iTunes and share this with somebody who you know who might be looking for more consciousness in their life. You can visit me on Shannon-Ohara.com or talktotheentities.com. And to learn more about the amazing tools of Access Consciousness, you can visit accessconsciousness.com and be sure to subscribe to the podcast.